So hello everybody and welcome to the stuff of my nightmares, because the build we are doing today is sort of an amalgamation of all the things I don't like to do in Minecraft and I'm not very good at on top of that. Because I finally decided to relocate my base and I thought I would start it off with a storage system and build it inside of a giant castle on top of a very cool looking mountain. And that's where the nightmare begins, because I'm not very good at building castles, and I'm not just talking about the castle that we've all built in Minecraft, you know, a little bit of cobblestone, some walls here and there, connect them to towers and bam, you're done, but an actual good looking, sort of more modern castle where you have a ton of towers and you just look at it and you're like, oh my god, how do you even begin to conceptualize the layout of this place? That kind of castle, you know, the castle that good builders make. Castles that are not necessarily good at defending things, but damn do they look nice. I always felt that castles like these were way out of my league because you need a ton of towers and spires and a ton of roofs, and that's just, as I've said in the beginning, not stuff I'm very good at. What makes it even worse though is that we're only making a facade of a castle, so we're building it from the outside in so that I'm able to fit in my storage and some smelting and all that kind of stuff. So I can't even rely on a floor plan to sort of build a castle from the ground up. But that doesn't mean that you can't start with a floor plan, I think. So I did do a floor plan to at least know the layout of the castle, or at least what the outside walls of the castle would be once it's done. Now, I didn't want to build it with just one material, which I feel looks too flat and is one of the biggest problems when it comes to castle building in Minecraft. So I wanted to have a gradient where I would have some darker blocks at the bottom. In this case, I thought I would start with polished basalt, which I got a ton of from clearing out the basalt delta for the Wither Fortress, and I would gradually lighten it up until the castle was made out of stone. The idea behind that is to sort of break up the flatness, but to also create an artificial shadow so the castle is darker at the bottom. So I initially started off with the basalt before sprinkling in some coal ore, then a bunch of andesite, and finally I transitioned that over to smooth stone. Now, while I initially thought the basalt would be great, it ended up not looking particularly good, mainly because the corners of it or the sides are simply too dark, so it was too obvious of a texture in there, so I eventually took it all out and replaced it with cobblestone instead. Now, as you can see, I've created a ton of different tower and spire and building shapes around the initial wall. This, by the way, is just going to be the center of the castle. The castle is eventually gonna spread out over the mountain a little bit more to try and sort of force myself out of building samey looking towers that are similar height and similar shape and have similar roofs, because this way I'll have to figure out how to work out different types of shapes. Some of them are square, some of them are round, some of them have weird numbers of blocks on the sides, which will hopefully result in different looking towers, which will then also lead to different kinds of roofs being on top of those towers. And I also threw in a few diagonal walls here and there, but I didn't do it too much because I didn't want to be too optimistic, because diagonal building is yet another thing that I'm not very good at, so I didn't want to overdo it and then basically sabotage myself too much at the very start. But here you can see the sort of final block gradient, the artificial shadow that I was trying to make, with the cobblestone at the very bottom, then a few bits of coal ore here and there, then a pretty thick layer of andesite, and finally now I'm adding a layer of stone as well. Next on the menu was to sort of sprinkle random bits of cobblestone around the actual wall so that it looks like it was actually built there and there's some rubble around the walls, rather than, you know, the top of the mountain just being shaved off and then the castle being plopped on top of it. This was also around the time where I remembered that I always make the initial castle wall too short, so I added few extra blocks on top. And then came the moment I was dreading the most up until this point, and that was to make the first building, because I didn't do anything in creative mode thus far, so I was just freehanding it, and at the start you really have no idea what the final sort of look is gonna be. Once you get the first building down, it's okay, but the first one, yeah, not good. So I ended up setting in creative mode for a little bit, which I feel is almost a necessity for this kind of project, and I came up with a pretty cool design for both the central building as well as the towers. What definitely didn't help was the whole, you know, I'm gonna force myself to work with different shapes thing, because the outside towers in the four corners were 4x4. They were even numbered, and it's much easier to work with odd numbers like 3 by 3 because, you know, you have a little bit more detail to work with. But I think the towers I ended up going with look pretty nice. They have a decent amount of detail, you know, considering the size of them, and the roofs ended up looking quite nice as well. A lot of the buildings, by the way, are going to be pretty bland to begin with, and that's because I really don't like doing too much detail from the very start. I want to get the shell of the build done before I start detailing, and I also like to do windows from the inside out, because when you do it that way, you actually put windows in places that make sense, and it, in the end, tends to look much more natural. Now, this is also the time when I finished the central roof, which was very straightforward. It was just a bunch of stairs, and that was deliberate. I didn't want to do anything too fancy because I felt like it would be too busy with all the towers there as well. Now, once the towers were done, I had to sort of do something about the front of the building because as it was, the building was sitting on the edge of a cliff with the towers, the front 2 blocks on both towers, overhanging the cliff a little bit. And at first I wanted to just build the mountain up a little bit to make it sit a little bit more naturally, but in the end I actually embraced the overhang. I extended it a little bit and then added some extra cobblestone to the bottom. This was one of those feels good moments that I sometimes have when I'm building something where I'm just like, what about this? And then I do it and it looks great. So that gave me a little bit of confidence. And I decided to pan the camera down a little bit to sort of give you an idea of what this is going to look like once it's done from the actual like village that we're going to build around this. Now after that, I spent some more time in creative mode and I came up with a weird tower design that I thought was pretty cool, that was 3 by 3 from the front but 5 by 5 from the side. So it started off as sort of a pillar and then it slowly expands into a full room. Now the roof for this one, I wanted to do something different because I didn't want all roofs to be the same, but I'm still not sure about this one. And I also did some detailing at the front because I didn't want this to just be like a wall of stone, so I added some stairs and some walls to add additional depth. I was so happy with this tower design, in fact, I decided to do another one right next to it, but make it really tall. Now, it might look a bit weird on its own because it's just this thin, tall tower, but the idea I have for this is that it's sort of gonna cascade upwards, so this is just the outer wall, and then after a little bit, there's gonna be another wall that's gonna go up, and then another wall that's gonna go up, and so on and so on and so on. So it's gonna be like a cascading effect, so there's actually going to be stuff behind this tower which will hopefully make it look less dinky, or you know, like it's going to fall the first time a little bit of wind comes in. And that's pretty much it for this tower because it's pretty much the same as the first one, it's just a little bit taller, though I did offset the details at the front by 2 blocks. After that, I actually had to adjust the outer wall a little bit by a block or 2 because I really couldn't come up with anything that would look even remotely good that would connect the initial building with the 2 towers that we've just built. So I squared it off a little bit and I made this sort of much thicker tower with a thinner tower coming out at the top in the center. And since the dimension of the smaller center tower were the same as on the first 4 towers, I just copied the design over. Then I built a short section of a diagonal roof between the new tower and the previous 2 towers to sort of help me decide what the roof was going to be for the lower section of the tower. And I decided to sort of carry the theme of the diagonal roof through. And while I think the roof turned out fine, it might just be too much and I might slim it down later. And I topped it all off by connecting it all together with another piece of a diagonal roof that follows the same design as the bit we already did. And this is where I was starting to get a little bit more confident because if I pan the camera down a little bit to show you the angle you will actually see this from, it's starting to look kind of nice, even though there isn't too much detail in there just yet. Now, after looking at this for a little bit, I felt like the 2 thin tall towers should have been connected by something, so I added some stairs and walls to create like a short buttress. And I also felt like maybe we could have another bit of it, but this time instead of it facing in, we could face it to the side and we could take it off the taller tower to give it a little bit more structure. And that was another one of those feels good moments because that was not the plan, I just tried it out and it looked great in my opinion. I mean, you know, when you look at the left side of the castle, it's starting to look like something now. But anyway, the next section of the castle was actually pretty straightforward. I didn't want to do anything too fancy because this was a very narrow section of the castle, the narrowest in fact. So I didn't want to do anything too fancy so that it's not like overly detailed. So instead of doing some fancy towers and a bunch of roofs, I decided to do one central building with a short rampart connecting it to the part we've just built, as well as another rampart that comes up sort of diagonally. And I went with an extremely simple design for the ramparts, but I think it ended up looking great because it's literally just a block with 2 bits of wall above and below it. And I did actually add some trapdoors and normal doors at this point to add a little bit of color to the rampart so they're not just big gray blobs of bleh. And then I just did a very straightforward roof because I've tried like a few weird roofs in creative mode and none of them really fit. So I tried a more standard roof and that ended up looking really good, especially from a distance. I did not want it to be flat at the top though, so I've added some extra blocks with some half slabs and some stairs, just so, you know, there's a little bit of detail in there, but not too much. And then as I was building this, I thought it would be kind of cool to have a rampart sort of on the second layer from this side that would sort of run behind the 2 rickety towers. So that's exactly what I did. I did a short rampart there, and you can see me building it right now as the sun goes down. And that's sort of the outer shell on this side finished. Or, you know, at least like the first layer of it. Now on the other side, I wanted to have it a little bit more open because I want to have a courtyard in here somewhere where my beacon is right now. So I started off with the diagonal rampart and it goes into, I don't really know what I would call this because it's essentially still a rampart. It just has some walls and a roof over it. And I wanted this roof to be a little bit more intricate because it's very wide and it's not very pointy. So if it was just flat, I think it would look too boring. Now from there, we move on to the first proper disaster of the build because the following 2 towers are absolutely atrocious and they have to be rebuilt. But I'm still gonna show it because that's just how it is. Not everything you build is gonna be great. Sometimes you just have to try a few times before you come up with something that you like. So if you don't like it, just delete it. What is the saying? Don't cling to a mistake just because you spend a long time making it or something like that. And it's very true. Just don't be scared. Just if you don't like it, take it down, try it again. These towers were just wrong on so many levels. They were bulky, there was not enough detail, the roofs didn't really fit into the whole thing, the positioning was all off. It was just boring and not good. Just not good. So let's take them down and try again. So here we are, tearing down the horrendous towers, and I was bouncing around between survival and creative, and I decided that I'm gonna start off a little bit to the left and I'm sort of gonna build into this corner. So as I tore down the towers, I was playing around in creative and I decided to start with a tower over here instead. Now what I did for this tower is kind of took inspiration from the 4x4 towers, of which we built like 5 now, and I designed a 5x5 tower with 2 different layers that was based on that. And then unsurprisingly, I once again struggled with the roof, so I came up with a few designs in creative and I wasn't quite happy with any of them, so I just kept tearing it down, building up, tearing it down, building up, until I came up with a design that I quite liked. And as I started building it in survival, I was just like, I wonder if I can just, you know, make it a little bit taller. So I started modifying it and I ended up with this, which I think is a fantastic looking roof. I love it. Then as I moved on to the first tower that I bolted up last time, I kind of flew around. I was like, I don't have a door. There is no way to get into this thing. So I decided that this is where the main gate is gonna be, to this section of the castle. And what I did is I did like a V-cut on top of the gate with ramparts on either side and then a turret behind it, which ended up looking pretty cool. And for the second tower I bolted up last time, I actually just built one of the like tall rickety towers again because it makes sense that the towers would be the same, right? I mean, we have 4 towers to the right of it that are exactly the same, so why not use a tower that I've already designed and I know I like. But at this point I felt like I was done. I just didn't have any more ideas. I couldn't think of anything I would want to add to it, so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give it a rest for a day or so, let my creative juices refill, do something else for a bit and then come back refreshed. So here is the final shot for the video and for the day. I think it's okay. It's not like, you know, a grandiose castle that someone like BWO would build. It's not even close to that, but as far as my castles go, it's probably the best one I've built so far. I really like how the 2 thin rickety towers turned out, so we might add a few more of those sprinkled throughout because, as I've said, there is going to be more layers to this, so it's going to be a little bit taller in the middle. There also needs to be a lot of detailing done to this with some, you know, fence gates and trapdoors and windows and all that kind of stuff, as well as a little bit of landscaping, you know, add some custom trees and all that. I also want to add some highlight blocks and create more artificial shadows, not just, you know, the cobblestone at the bottom, but I want to add some darker blocks to the little nooks and crannies to make them look like they are darker. But all in all, I'm pretty satisfied with what we have here. I think it's a good start and I thank you very much for watching. As always, I hope you've enjoyed the video and I'll see you some other time. Bye bye.